Welcome to the Leaf Blower Podcast.
All right. Welcome to episode 2 of the Whiskey Podcast. We're your co-hosts, ChewDada and N8FOO. Before we get started today, I think we should do a special throw out to our biggest supporters, our families. Because let's be real, without them, we wouldn't have as much a reason to drink.
Happy Mother's Day, guys.
Happy Mother's Day.
We will be receiving those divorce papers for a gift tomorrow, right?
Right.
Tonight has just been fraught with technical difficulties and other sorts of mishaps and mayhem. But if this is the worst this is going to get, I think we're okay continuing to do these. I'm going to light this real quick. You introduce us to the whiskey we are drinking tonight.
All right. As we've already set up during episode 1, every night we will be tasting a new whiskey, bourbon, or scotch. Tonight we are starting with the Mulholland Distillery American Whiskey. It is 100 proof, 50% alcohol by volume.
That's a stinger.
Here in California.
In Los Angeles, nonetheless.
Oh, I didn't realize it was that close.
Yeah, we are drinking from our home bath here.
It's pretty damn good, not gonna lie.
It isn't bad. It isn't bad. It is. Let's see what the specs on this thing are. It's a 94% corn, 4% rye, 2% malted barley, 100 proof American whiskey. They say here the tasting notes are vanilla bean, sweet corn, which, you know, any bourbon is going to have corn. That's its main ingredient. That's what makes it a bourbon. So, or an American whiskey, as it were. And well, I'm picking up some of that. I don't pick up as much as the vanilla as I probably would like, and I'm a big fan of vanilla. But it's sweet. I like it. This is definitely something I could knock back a few times a week, or a few weeks at a time.
Well, being that this is our second bottle, we've already proven we can do that. So cheers to progress.
Cheers to progress. Yeah, that's a good one. I'm glad you picked that one out for tonight. Oh, there's the vanilla. You know what? It took a couple of hits of the cigar to finally pair it up right. And this week's cigar is also another hand roll. It's one of the darker ones. I like it.
He likes the darker wraps when he puts them in his mouth.
Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. You knock that shit off.
Yeah, well, the fire went out anyway. So
oh my god.
Alright.
Let me go get another log. You introduce our topic.
Dude, you don't need another log. It's fine.
I need another log.
So, tonight we thought we would talk a bit about family. For some of you that know, and for some of you that don't know, N8FOO and I are actually brothers-in-law. Our wives are sisters. So we figured we'd kind of give you guys a little bit of a background of who each of us is and how we grew up, and then use that to explain a bit the craziness that is our wives' family. And the fact that, yes, they drive us to drink. And kind of what that means big picture moving forward, and why we feel that's important to who we are.
Well, one of the reasons it's so important, and you know, I know this was the case with me, and just through conversations we've had, I know it's very similar with you. We did not grow up in a family like our wives had.
That's a very polite way of saying it.
The other term we like to use is unhealthy codependency, but they make it work, and it's very unique. The families that, the family I grew up with, you know, your typical American Horror Story, divorce, messy, moved around a lot. I didn't have a whole lot of roots planted anywhere. Wasn't close with my extended family because we were always moving around. So that I kind of learned to grow up being kind of a loner, a homebody, a little vagabondish. So when I fell into this family, and we were doing dinner at the aunt's house on Fridays, because fuck it, it's Friday. I was very taken aback by that. This was not something I was used to. I was lucky if we did Friday with my own family for any reason, you know, even important ones. So to just have a random, it's Friday, we're going to go hang out with the cousins and Just weird, just very foreign.
Yeah, same with me. We had very different backgrounds, but also very similar backgrounds in a lot of ways. My mom's side of the family was very good, very close. We had our problems, which a lot of it you didn't actually realize until you were much older. But my dad's side of the family was the destructive part of it, we'll say.
We have that in common.
And suddenly come out here, and, you know, not only is it a massive family, but they do stuff together all the time just 'cause. It's a major difference. I was very happy staying home and hiding under the covers. Meanwhile, you know, I'd been dating my wife, my current wife. Well, my wife, now that she's my wife. I don't know, you know what the fuck I'm talking about.
Someone's sleeping on the couch tonight.
So, the first time I really met the rest of the family, first time I was allowed to date my now wife was after several of her family members approved of me in what I call the conspiracy date. But, you know, they get together, they talk, they're always with each other.
Oh, they twirled him around and looked at his butt and all the, yeah.
And we drank wine. If I hadn't drank wine, I don't think we'd be where we are today. So why don't you start giving us a little bit more detail about your childhood and family life growing up?
Well,
how you got sucked into this craziness.
Where to begin? It was a dark and stormy night. Without going too far back, let's just say,
he's old.
Well, there's history there that I don't really, you know. We'll get into it over the courses.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say in my mid-20s, real low part of life was going through some really tough times with employment, with a previous relationship. Just wasn't good. But through the course of that, I ran with some weird circles of friends, and those circles of friends had weird circles of friends, and those circles of friends had weird circles of friends. So here I am one night, just driving around town with a buddy of mine, and I get a text from a friend of mine's girlfriend. Hey, we're at a house party, and, you know, can someone come buy booze? We've all done it. We've all had that illegal party with our friends, with someone older buying the booze, so I guess it was my turn to pay it back. And that's when I met my wife. Just kind of hanging out at this party. She was friends with my friend's girlfriend. And we just got to talking, and it was one of those, that was the first time in a long time that I actually could just sit down and be open with someone. And I think it helped that I wasn't, the odds of us dating were 10 years different in age. I think it made it easy because, what are the chances of this working out? And much to my surprise, those conversations were good. And kind of brought me back out of a funk. She got me to stop drinking. Kinda.
Well, talk a little bit more about that specifically.
Alcoholism runs in my family, both sides of it, as well as a whole other plethora of addictions on my mother's side. So I have to be very careful when stuff goes sad and sideways for me that I don't fall into that hole again. One of the things that was actually brought up when we started this podcast was, how much are you guys going to drink? Because my wife is very aware, more so aware than I am sometimes about drinking problems. So again, that being what it is, and her not being able, legal to drink for the first few years of our relationship.
She's legal now.
She was legal then, just different kind of legal. I was able to pull back on the drinking and again, just see it from a different perspective and kind of get my shit cleaned up. Got healthy employment, stopped being a kid.
How long ago was that now?
Monday? It's been a while. It's just strange to think because it happens so slowly. It's that, and I've been using this term way too much, and it's really starting to aggravate me. The frog in a pot.
Mm-hmm.
It just, over time, it just slowly got better and better and better and better and better. And when I look back now, I just go, holy crap, how did I even survive?
Mm-hmm.
I was literally I was working 2 jobs, and I was literally spending one of those paychecks every week in a bar. That's absurd. It's to the point where the bartender, the bar I went to, still to this day, the bar's been closed for 6-7 years now. Still invites me to his house for Christmas and 4th of July.
Well, that certainly says something. Put his kids through college?
Yeah, I think so. I think I paid for at least a car. Or
Alright.
2 or 3. I don't know. I can't. When I look back on it, it's crazy. It's crazy that I went from that to this, and I have one person to thank for that, and her wackadoo family.
Well, we'll talk about the wackadoo family because we both have it. But let's talk a little bit my coming to this party, so to speak. So, I also went through the parents, married, divorced, all that sort of problems. In my case, though, my father was abusive. Physically, verbally, emotionally, all that stuff. So I matured a little bit faster at a very young age. At one point, around 10 years old, he came at me drunk, and I picked up a baseball bat and beat the shit out of him to defend myself. And from that point on, kind of started taking matters in my own hands.
That's, what every 10-year-old has to do. That's
Of course.
coming of age.
Of course, of course. But, as you might imagine, that damaged the hell out of me. I was suddenly in a position of having to be far more mature than my peers. So, high school had everything from the drug and alcohol things to suicide and all those thoughts that ran through it. And it wasn't actually until I found, of all things, theater. A teacher came by, saw me, and said, "Hey, why don't you come help out with this?" And from there, kind of was a lifeline that I worked on and ended up getting myself into the entertainment industry. But even growing up, after high school and going into college in my 20s, it's always the, I know everything complex.
Hire a teenager while they still know everything.
Exactly. I was eager to prove myself, and I proved myself through my work because at that point, that's the only way I really knew how.
Right.
Didn't really have a whole lot of friends or family that I relied on in a close fashion. So I lived in my work. And it wasn't until my early 30s that I had really significantly burned myself out. Most of my friends at some point had become ill from the constant martyrdom of the entertainment industry. That we stopped and reflected and kind of looked at what's next. And thankfully around that time, you and your wife were getting married.
Right.
And it so happened that the photographer for your wedding was a good friend of mine. And when...
that we met because the photographer did roller derby, and the photographer was the photographer for the team.
No,
and
she was a official.
She was an official, and you were an official, so that's how
Right.
you two had previously known each other.
That's right. I used to work in women's roller derby. Ask me later.
couldn't wear skates, couldn't skate backwards, but ran the track.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, so
yeah, you want to talk about odd circles of circles of circles of circles that,
Right.
One day we're literally sitting at the venue doing our final walkthrough, getting everything planned, and the photographer turns to us and turns to Mama Bear and says, so I'll be doing your wedding as well, right? And she goes, yeah, right. You have to find me a nice, good Jewish boy first.
and what were the other requirements? Had to been born a guy, no...
Yeah, grown up, no, have a steady job, and lived on his own.
Yeah.
That was it. The biggest two were lives on his own and has a good job.
Mind you, my wife wasn't living on her own at this time, but that's another story.
She wanted to move up in life, not
Right.
move laterally. So
that's what I call the conspiracy date, because planning all of this...
yeah, she looks at us and goes, I think I know a guy.
Yeah.
So we had to set it all up, and just because, again, she was having issues of her own with relationships and whatnot, it was, and our photographer had said, yeah, he's a little gun-shy as well. So we just set up this, hey, we all like wine. Let's all hang out and grab mutual friends so there's an excuse for ChewDada here to be at the table.
Well, let's explain. Okay. So I'm one of the first to show up to this, and the photographer, who, by the way, is 8 months pregnant, is standing over a table at the wine bar, preventing anyone else from coming close to it because it had just enough seats for all of us that were supposed to be there. And she had coordinated with 2 more of my friends who also came from the, I knew one of them back from undergrad, but also in the entertainment field, in the roller derby arena, etc. were there. And they were, quote unquote, my backup. And then Mama Bear had N8FOO and Mrs. Foo there. And then her cousin showed up because it was around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And
An excuse to drink, which,
an excuse to drink, which none of the one in that family really needs.
I mean, we started a podcast so we could drink.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a tax write-off, right?
Right.
Right. And so we had to interact with each other and get approvals from each of our fine houses before we were allowed to go on a date of our own without the oversight.
Well, the beauty of that was, just with everyone and their social anxieties and their awkwardness and reticence to really be in relationships, was there were outs that if for whatever reason it didn't click, if it was just oil and water, they wouldn't be sitting there just awkwardly staring at each other going, so, yeah.
How about that local sports team?
How about that, right. How about that weather in California that's the same for 9 months out of the year, right? So we had enough people there that conversation could happen. Dada here could feel in his element and be himself and not have to, straighten up the tie and try to impress because he didn't know he was there to impress, right? That was the beauty of the setup, was it let everyone interact in a natural way so that we could see the real person. And I think that was, obviously you guys are married now, so success on our part. That was the most well-planned.
But I will point out, I was in fact not at your wedding.
You were not at my wedding, no.
And that is something that constantly comes up, that I was in fact not there.
Oh.
But I want to point out the fact that you just called me Dada, and that just feels weird.
You want me to call you Chewy?
Call me Chewy. I don't know, but
just don't call you late for dinner?
Calling me Dada. I mean, this is a different type of podcast at that point. But alright, so that's a bit of our background. Now really what we want to get into. So as you might imagine, neither of us thought we would ever be having kids of our own or large family gatherings.
None of that. Yeah,
and then there's our wives.
Yeah, was not in our DNA at all.
So, N8FOO kind of politely said unhealthy codependence. But the truth of the matter is that my wife and his wife talk more than best friends. They are in each other's heads, and it's kind of scary. In fact, we're in quarantine right now. This is being filmed during the pandemic. But the fact that the 2 families couldn't interact with each other as often as they do was a sheer panic and caused anxiety and withdrawals and significant mental health issues for them.
Yeah.
And I say that while, Mama Bear's over there holding my baby.
Bouncy.
Judging us.
She's not judging.
Of course she is.
No.
She's House of Judgment.
Ah. Rock baby,
yes. Yes. So, I know, the first time I really met Mama Bear's family, so we had started dating for a bit. I say her family meaning her extended family, because at this point, if our wives could, we'd all be living in a giant commune, and everyone would be in the same house together. But the first time I met her extended family, we had just come from Thanksgiving that I hosted, of which I ordered a turkey, and she was very confused about how you could order a turkey. And I went to her family's Thanksgiving / one of her cousin's birthdays. I show up to meet her extended family, and I have food poisoning, and I'm throwing up all over the place, and her family still tries to keep me involved. And when I say her, immediate family, it's what? We're talking 4 other cousins and, parents, and then each of their kids.
Yeah.
And so I think, a small family gathering is somewhere easily around 40 people.
It's pretty large.
And I mean, just to put things in perspective, at my wedding we had roughly 120 people. 88 of those people were direct family members of our wives. So
You had it easy. See, when I first joined this family, because of the age difference, the 10-year age difference, I got grilled. It was, for obvious reasons, some random guy out of nowhere that's 10 years older than their youngest daughter just starts hanging around all the time.
Right.
My wife's grandfather on her mother's side, very, very, there was immediate tension with the fact that, one, I was 10 years older, two, I wasn't of the Jewish faith. Our families are religious. Well, they're culturally Jewish, I would say.
The ish is the important part.
Right. We're not in temple every weekend, and we celebrate the holidays and whatnot. So at one point in time, sitting at the dinner table, her grandfather looks at her and says, "Let me tell you, I will pay for your college. Right here, right now. I will pay for your college if you get rid of that guy right now." And it just that, I'm there just trying to enjoy dinner, and I'm going, who the fuck is this? Like, what the fuck is his problem? Like, I'm not beating her up. I'm not doing anything else. I'm just 10 years older than her. What's the issue? And it was like that. It was just tense. And the rest of the family was very cautious of my presence. Again, the 10-year age difference was just weird. So, thankfully, her father's mother was much more accepting and kind of won the family over and said, hey, said kind of the same thing. It was like, hey, he makes her happy. Isn't that what you want? Isn't that good enough? And they all kind of slowly came around. And then there was, so the last real holdout was Mom's dad. And we couldn't quite figure out what the issue was. And then during the course of all this, unfortunately, my grandmother had passed away. And what sounds like the start of a bad joke is my grandfather, a priest and a rabbi, were at my grandmother's funeral. And to me, that didn't strike me as odd because my grandfather was a yoga instructor at the local Jewish center. So to me, that was just like, oh, okay, he works at a Jewish center. It would make sense that he would have a rabbi friend at some point in time, considering he's in a kind of a religious profession, if you call yoga that, but he was into the spiritual side of that as well. So it didn't seem too off. But then, through the course of the proceedings, the rabbi gets up and does a thing that was very formal and very structured, and it confused me because that just didn't seem like something that would be done. So I pull him aside after the services and said, what's the story behind that? Why did a rabbi get up and speak? And he says, well, what most people didn't know about my family, because that side of the family, my dad's side is German. My mother's side was Dutch-Indonesian. I'm literally a product of World War II.
Mm-hmm.
My family was Jewish. And they fled Holland to Indonesia, to the Dutch colonies in Indonesia, to get away from the war. And at some point in time, off the island of Java, is it island of Java or the city of Java? I don't know. I don't care.
It's coffee related.
It's coffee related. A boat pulls up and says, we're going to America. And we're taking Presbyterians to go to America and start over. You're Presbyterian, right? And they said, well, no, we're actually Jewish, but, what's it taking? He said, no. We're only taking Presbyterians. You're a Presbyterian, right?
Wink, wink.
Wink, wink.
In case you can't get the subtlety in his voice.
Right. To which they said, yes, we are. Got on a boat, got out of Indonesia, started over in America. And, if you know anything about history, even coming to America, being Jewish wasn't really popular over here either, for different reasons than what was going on over in Europe. So they just kept up the ruse and just kept going to churches. It was, part of the process of being sponsored by the Presbyterian Church to come here was to go to services, make some money and get the word out, because that's what they do. So this whole time, I have Jewish lineage in my background. We just kind of set it aside for the safety and growth of the family. And upon learning this, I went back to the very next dinner, and I'm telling the story to Grandpa. And Poppy, yeah. So he looks at me and he says, "So you say you're Jewish?" I said, "Yes." And he says, "It was your grandmother, right?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Your mother's mother?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Welcome to the family." And from that point on, there was never any grief or guff. In fact, we started ganging up on my wife after that, because we were fast friends at that point. And it still struck me as it was a little insulting, because if that was the only reason you gave me that much grief was over this religion thing, that's kind of fucked up.
But at the same time, let's talk about who Poppy was. Poppy is our wife's mother's father. And there's two important stories that you have to know about him. First off, he would, quote-unquote, go for a drive to, just drive around and take care of things. Or so he told his wife. It turned out that he had scotch poured into medicine bottles that he kept in the glove box of his car. So if he wanted to go get a drink without the wife giving him shit about it, he would just go downstairs, go into the car, and sit there and, drink some scotch. We found empty just bottles. Like, he would pour them in and then just stuff the bottle in the crack of the seat. So when we had to sell the car after we passed, it's like, okay, let's give the car a detail. And it was like, oh, here's a bottle. Here's another bottle. What are these medicine bottles? Oh my gosh, there is just whiskey all over this damn car. But like, just also the matter of his passing, Mm-hmm. He was a stubborn, crotchety old man. And he said he will die before he ever gets put into a
nursing home
or
convalescent home,
like that. And sure enough, he had a fall or something that put him in the hospital for a bit.
Right, and the doctors then recommended it's probably time to get him convalesced.
Yeah. It wasn't even that. It was like, hey, you don't need to be in the hospital, but you should probably just have someone keep an eye on you while you recover.
Right.
And, discharged from the hospital, everything was fine. And from the hospital ride in the ambulance to
he actually
care.
In the assisted care. They gave him his room, he sat down in his bed, and immediately passed away.
Yeah. So over his dead body. And sure enough, he made that happen, because he was a stubborn asshole. But you know what? To Poppy.
Right? As I bang into my mic here.
Right. And you know what? That's kind of the way the family is. And I wrote about this a little bit on the blog.
Right.
When I was talking about my own fears of having a kid and what that meant. But this family overall, I wouldn't say they're necessarily better or worse. They've got their skeletons, they've got all their own issues. But at some point, every member of this family has kind of said, fuck it, I don't really care what anyone else thinks.
Right.
I'm going to live life according to my rules and what's involved with it and go from there. And each of them have had very different sets of rules. But just getting there has been quite the change and quite the difference, right?
Remind me sometime to tell you about the rift between your wife and me.
I'm reminding you now. Let's talk about the
in the early years. Well, okay, where are we at time-wise right now?
No, we're about 35 minutes in.
Oh, cool. So we've got some time. Nah, I'm not going to get into that. That's
No, get into it. Come on. You brought it up.
I still don't understand fully what the issue was, but at one point in time, I think I said something sideways to your wife, and
she was not my wife at the time.
No, and she was at my wedding. You weren't. There was easily a few months where I would come over for dinner and the conversations were almost, to the fact of, hey, Mom, could you tell Nate to pass me the salt? And I would pass her the salt. Mom, tell him thank you. Right? Like, I honestly, I forget what the issue was. And like I said, I think it was something, I said something sideways, thought I was being cute or snarky, and it was just not taken well. And it really, I don't know. It almost made her, it was going to be a make or break for the relationship with my wife and I because of the codependency.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you want in this family, basically how it worked is you have to make my sister happy.
I'll point out now, though, that very often my wife and N8FOO here agree on things that N8FOO and his wife disagree on.
Oh, our entire wedding. Like, I was very hands-off on the wedding. If any of you were planning on getting married, this is not a day for you guys. This is for them. So let them decide things. And my only rule with my own wedding was just run it by me, so I'm not surprised. If on my wedding day a juggling clown shows up, I just kind of want a heads up kind of thing, right? If there's an ice sculpture of Michelangelo, I don't want to be shocked. So just run it by me.
I'll point out that this doesn't actually sound too far-fetched because, because of how close our wives are, they'll actually tell each other the same thing 2 or 3 times and never tell N8FOO and I either. Most of the things we know is because, hey, did you know we're doing that? No? Okay, we're doing that.
Right.
Just so you know.
But, so yeah, while they're running everything by me, there were a couple of things that were hang-ups, right? And my wife is sitting here going, well, I've got my sister, so I'm going to win this battle, right? And we'd sit down, and I think it was the invitations was the last one. It was like, we were going through them, and they had already decided, right? This is the one I want, and Mrs. Chewy had already picked the ones that she had decided. And then I come in and go, okay, this is what I'm, I've given 5 options. And it's like, no, this is out. And I see a smile on her face, and I'm like, okay. And I was like, this is the one I really like. And we put it in the middle of the table, and my wife is just like, son of a bitch. And I'm like, what? And she goes, I didn't want that one, but I told my sister that we'll leave it to the popular vote. And sure enough, so I ended up getting the invitations I wanted because the sister agreed. And so a majority vote. It was fair and equitable. And that turned out to a few more decisions during the wedding turned out to happen again and again and again and again, where it was like when it was put to a vote, his wife and me would typically agree. And then, unironically enough, the same thing happened with their wedding.
I will point out that, N8FOO actually has amazing taste, despite, what he looks like.
But I'm schlubby tonight. Don't give me shit. So they were making decisions, and so there were disagreements between his wife and him, and they would bring in my wife as the moderator, and my wife would always side with ChewDada. So, like, the prophecy went the other way around. It's just kind of amusing. Like, it's almost that we married the wrong sisters.
No, I think we married the right ones.
But what's funny is, I can openly admit right now, had I married your wife, I'd either be dead or have killed her by now. Because we are too much alike. And then same thing, if you were with my wife, that would have never worked. But the personalities are there. It's just kind of, it always amuses me. So when it comes to you and I, it's funny because we have just
we're really just dating each other.
Right. And we have that same right amount of difference that we're not, I don't have to look at you and I'm always agreeing with you.
And for those of you that are actually wondering, N8FOO can be big or little spoon. He's flexible that way.
I'm very bendy.
Let's actually talk about what it feels like to be married into this craziness. I know that, in my particular case, having this amount of people 30 to 40 people at a minimum at a small family gathering is ridiculously overwhelming for me.
Oh my God. Right? I have crowd anxiety. I don't do well at concerts. I don't do well at large venues. It's overwhelming.
I am agoraphobic as well.
Right. I think I've used that term before, and I've been corrected many a times that it's not agoraphobia by definition.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally just crowd anxiety. Agoraphobia has a whole different connotation, like you would not be able to exist outside the house.
Touche.
But yeah, it's close. It's akin. They're bedfellows. So, and that's one of the things that like you and I have gotten along with, because we were the guys at the like when I was going to family occasions for years before you showed up, and I was
because I was not at their wedding.
You were not at my wedding. Hashtag you were not at my wedding. Yeah, I mean, I'd be going to these things and going to these things and going to these things, and these family gatherings, I would always, sneak away and have a smoke, or sneak away and just go for a walk, because I was just constantly overwhelmed. And one of the nice things was when you came into this family, and the first time I walked away, it was like, I peace out, I'm done, I've got to go decompress. And my wife is just, okay, this is normal for me. And you were sitting there going, well, shit.
Can I go with you?
Can I go with you? Sure, why not? And so we both started walking away and got to talking, and and again, it was just one of those little man bonding moments. It was like, oh, you're kind of fucked up like I am. And that's when we, started comparing our past and realized just how similar a lot of it is, and it makes sense.
I want to point out, at no point did members of the family, at least after his revelation, did no point did members of the family ever make us feel like we were not part of the family.
No, and they completely understood when I walked away.
At no point did we ever feel that we were outsiders, or that we were forced upon them, or that we weren't part of the cool kids or anything like that. But in a situation where you grow up with such a small trust circle and such a small group of close, intimate friends, and suddenly you're in a situation where everyone is together, that is fucking terrifying. It is overwhelming. And you know what? It's okay. And N8FOO just jumped into the neighbor's yard. Oh, he brought more wood for the fire. All right. So,
if I have any piece of advice for anyone that owns a home, get to know your neighbors. You never know, they might be really fucking cool. And my neighbor in particular,
he's kind of a badass. We really like him.
He's an old theater geek. He's responsible for our lighting tonight. We may need to work on it a little bit more, but last week, if you go back and watch the VOD about this time of night, you couldn't see us. So he gave us an old stage light so that we could actually be seen during the stream.
He also provides many other creature comforts to help.
He gives you free weed.
He does give me free weed. Free weed that he grows himself.
Right?
I mean, that's from the heart.
It was one of those, when we moved into this house, the wall that's over to my right here, it's a very low wall. I'd say maybe, 4 feet?
Yeah, give or take.
So I had a choice, when I moved in here. It was like, either get to know the guy or build a wall. And I'd rather not build a wall. I got very fortunate with the condo that I had, that when I moved in, knowing what condo and apartment life is, where you're sharing walls with people, the first thing I did when I moved in was I went to the downstairs neighbor, because we were upstairs, and knocked on his door and said, hey, we're your new neighbors. If we're ever too loud, here's my phone number. Call me. Just tell me to shut the fuck up. Right? And then the same thing with the ones across the hall.
Across the hall?
Yeah, doorway. So we shared a bedroom wall. Same thing. I went over and introduced myself and said, hey, if we're ever obnoxious or noisy, just let us know. We'll knock it down. And then the other side, same thing. I made sure to communicate with them and say, hey, this is who we are. This is how to reach us. You don't need to bang on the roof with the broom. You don't need to pound on the wall. Please don't call the cops on us. Right? I'm really not beating her up.
Much.
She just falls down the stairs a lot.
Multiple times.
So, when I moved into the house, the same thing applied. It was just like, at least get to know the person and reach out. It's like, in this case, I'm podcasting 30 feet away from his bedroom window. And because of that, he and I are really good friends. And that's nice because there have been times that I've needed to do things, and Joe is very, very, very handy. And being a stagehand, he has a lot of tools and equipment that I would not have access to, or I'd have to go spend a fortune to do. And he's always been accommodating and helped me out. Like I said, the lighting. I've got a rototiller sitting back here that I've been meaning to till the yard that he loaned me. And then I've come over and I've helped him work on his computer. And so it's a good relationship.
So all of you might be seeing this in the dark, but you can actually tell that this yard needs a lot of help. Most of the help it's received is from Joe. Joe knows his way around the weeds.
Joe knows baseball? Or no, that's Bo knows. Bo knows baseball.
Yeah. But yeah, so like taking all this back to the family and how we all got together, the big part is we've been forced together by circumstance, and it turns out that we actually, our wives collect broken people, I guess. And that's part of the reason why we've gotten together, but we also have lived and have dealt with life. Let's go ahead and close up this episode, shall we?
All right. I'm looking forward to the next episode. Are you looking forward to the next episode?
I am looking forward to the next episode. We're actually going to have our first guest in the next episode.
A very good friend of ours.
Who's kind of, part of the inspiration behind this.
Not to blow sunshine up his ass before he even gets here, probably has a lot to do with the fact that I stream and podcast and do all of the stuff because he was an absolute madman. But you'll have to tune into the next episode.
Right. But until then, wrapping this up on the fact that, we tag this as being counseling. We're here. We're together. We're making this all work. Thank you all for coming by.
It's been fun.
It's been fun. Join us for episode 3, where we're going to bring on our first guest, the one, the only Danfinity. And for all of you, have a good night.
All right.
Thank you.